Every once in a while, you'll see someone share a clip online with a caption like, "The Simpsons predicted this," and it's usually followed by something wild. A robot librarian, a specific sports score, some political event that hadn't happened yet, and people lose their minds over it every single time. But here's the thing. The older you get, the less interesting that version of the show becomes, because the predictions were never really the point. They were a side effect. A coincidence that happened when you spend 35 years drawing an extremely honest picture of how people actually live. The Simpsons wasn't warning you about the future. It was warning you about right now. And the difference is everything. Springfield looks like the American dream from a distance. A house with a yard, a steady job, a family that argues but stays together. 2 cars and a dog and a TV that's always on. The whole thing is assembled like a promise someone handed you when you were young, and the show never explicitly tells you that. The promise has fine print. It just keeps running the episodes, week after week. Same couch, same opening credits, same nuclear plant looming over everything. Homer Simpson has worked the same job since before his youngest child was born, in a building that actively tries to kill him, for a man who has never once learned his name correctly. And for most of the show, that's just background information. It's the setup, not the story. But at some point, that background stops being funny and starts being familiar, because you've met Homer. Maybe you've been Homer, the guy who took the job because he needed the job, and then one day looked up and realized the job had taken 20 years in return. There's an episode where Homer is given the chance to quit the plant and pursue something he actually loves, and he does. And it's wonderful for exactly as long as the episode allows it to be. Then reality closes back in, not dramatically, just quietly, the way it usually does. And he goes back, not because he's broken or weak, but because that's what the math of his life requires. The show doesn't score that moment with sad music. It doesn't ask you to feel anything specific about it. It just moves on to the next scene. That restraint is part of what makes Springfield feel so accurate. Marge carries a different kind of weight, and the show knows it, even when it doesn't say it directly. There are episodes scattered across the early seasons where she gets a glimpse of something else. A talent, a career, a version of herself that exists outside the role she stepped into so completely that she sometimes seems to have forgotten there was ever anything before it. The painting episodes, the real estate arc, that brief moment where she's genuinely good at something in public, around other people, and you can see what she might have built if the circumstances had lined up differently. And then the episode ends, and she's back in the kitchen, and the show never really explains why that keeps happening, because it doesn't need to. You already know why, because most people do. Bart is the one that used to feel the simplest, the rebel, the kid who never quite paid attention long enough to get in serious trouble. But the longer you watch, the stranger his story becomes. Because Bart is smart. Genuinely, obviously smart in ways the show lets slip through constantly. Quick instincts, creative problem solving, a natural ability to read people that he mostly uses for chaos. And the show occasionally points at the gap between what he is and what he's actually doing with it. There are episodes where he sees a version of his future self, and the vision is not kind, and he flinches, and then he resets. The reset used to feel like a cartoon convention. Now it feels like something else, like watching someone choose comfort over change so many times that eventually the choice stops feeling like a choice at all. Lisa is the character people talk about most when they talk about the show's insight. The moral compass, the one who sees things clearly and says them plainly and gets ignored anyway. And there's truth in that reading. But what the show actually does with her is a little harder to sit with, because Lisa is right about almost everything. And being right costs her constantly. She wins the argument and loses the room. She earns the grade and loses the friend. She cares deeply about things that the people around her have decided not to care about, and she carries that gap alone. There's a moment in an early episode where a substitute teacher she loves has to leave, and he gives her a note. It just says her name, and she cries in a way that feels disproportionate until you understand what it means. Someone saw her fully and still had to go. That's not a lesson. That's just something that happens to people who feel things more than the world around them is equipped to handle. The town of Springfield itself is doing something quiet across all of these stories. It keeps reflecting back a version of society that nobody asked to recognize themselves in. The way local institutions hollow out slowly. The way community starts to mean less as everyone gets busier. The way the same arguments recycle through generations without resolution. Flanders and Homer have been having the same fundamental disagreement about values and lifestyle since the first season.
Idly-ho, neighbor. Want to go to the game with me? I got 2 teeth.
Neither of them has convinced the other of anything. They're still neighbors. They're still there every morning. That's not a prediction. That's a portrait of how real disagreement actually works between people who have to keep living near each other anyway. The show's relationship with work is where it gets most precise. Not just Homer's burnout or Marge's quiet compromises, but the whole ecosystem of Springfield's economy. The plant runs on dysfunction. The nuclear material is stored carelessly. The safety protocols are theater, and everyone knows it, including the people enforcing it, and nothing changes because nothing changing is more convenient than the alternative. There's no single villain in that story. There's just a system that keeps going because stopping it would require more energy than anyone has left after a full shift. You watched that as a kid and thought it was satire. You watch it now and think about your inbox. What the show understood, maybe better than it intended to, is that the hardest part of adulthood isn't the dramatic moments. It's the ordinary ones. The Tuesday evenings, the budget conversations, the slow realization that you've been doing something for long enough that you've forgotten why you started. Homer doesn't have a villain's origin story. He has a mortgage and a commute and a boss who calls him Bromwell and a family that needs him to keep showing up. And he does, every episode. Not heroically, just consistently, which is its own kind of quiet courage that the show never quite names. And Bart is still 10 years old, and Lisa is still 8, and the town keeps running, and Marge keeps holding the thing together, and Homer keeps going back to the plant. And somewhere in that endless loop, across 35 years of episodes, the show built the most detailed and honest map of what American middle-class adulthood actually feels like from the inside. Not the highlights, not the catastrophes, just the texture of it, the weight of ordinary days stacked on top of each other until you look back and realize how much time has passed inside the routine. That's what hits different when you watch it now. Not the jokes that aged poorly or the celebrity cameos or the fact that they somehow got the smartwatch right in 1995. It's the smaller things, the way Homer looks at the house sometimes, and you can see him calculating everything it cost to keep. The way Marge straightens up a room that nobody else seems to notice is messy. The way Lisa reads alone in hers. You didn't understand any of that when you were young. You weren't supposed to. It wasn't for you yet. The Simpsons wasn't trying to predict your life. It was documenting someone else's in enough detail, with enough honesty, that one day your life would catch up to it. And when it did, all those episodes you watched as background noise would suddenly feel like something you'd been carrying without knowing. That's not a prediction. That's just very good writing about very ordinary things. And it turns out ordinary things are the ones that stay with you the longest. But if ordinary life was the first warning Springfield had for us, it wasn't the last. Because underneath all the routine and the burnout and the quiet compromises, there's one character whose story cuts deeper than any of the rest. The one who never quite fit into the life Springfield offered and spent every episode paying for it. We'll get into that next time. And trust me, once you see what the show was really doing with him, you'll never watch Springfield the same way again. See you on the next dive.